There's no such thing as custody in Texas. That is our topic for the day. Welcome to the Lawyers and Mediators International Show and Podcast by instantmediations.com, where we discuss law and conflict resolution topics to educate both professionals and everyday people. Catch regular episodes on YouTube, the Instant Mediations app, and anywhere you get your podcasts. Just remember, nothing in these episodes constitutes legal advice, so be sure to talk to a lawyer, as cases are fact dependent. Hey everyone, this is Mac Pierre-Louis, attorney, mediator, arbitrator, working throughout Florida and really hot Texas right now.
This is Sherell Carter, attorney, attorney Carter, coming from the Bayou City State. It is hot out here. How are you guys doing?
So we're here to talk a little bit about family law. And of course, Sherell Carter and I were both Texas family law attorneys, and we're back on LMI podcast to discuss, some things on her series on changing the narrative with Sherell Carter. And of course, her website, justicebycarter.com. All right. So Sherell, the title is controversial. There's no such thing as custody in Texas. And the reason we picked it is to try to dissuade people from a myth that's out there. This myth that and when parents are separated or divorced, some parent just gets the child and the other parent gets nothing, or the other parent gets some schedule. And that's what people might think happens. And they use the word custody. So I get a lot of calls from a parent who might say, well, I want sole custody. And then I would ask them, what does that mean to you? What is custody to you? And sometimes people don't have they have difficulty explaining what they really mean. And so what I've come to discover is that people have a zero-sum game in their mind. They think that custody is where one parent gets a child, decides everything for them, has a child all the time, and the other parent gets some kind of schedule to be able to visit the child, maybe supervised visits or a couple other weekends a month. However, the legislature doesn't want that. The legislature wants shared parenting, co-parenting. They want both parents to be involved in the child's life. And how do we know that? We have something called the joint managing conservatorship. So the word is not custody, the word is conservatorship, where the parents are conservators over their children to be able to make decisions for their children and have rights over their own kid, right? So that is what it's all about, conservatorship, not custody. Separate that from visitation and possession. I know some people get offended when you say they have visitation rights because they're not visiting their kid, they're possessing their kid. So what I like to say is you both are presumed to be joint conservators, and one parent is going to have a possession schedule to keep the peace. And that happens all the time in Texas, but you and I, Sherell, have, as mediators as well, have dealt with different scenarios. And so let's talk about other ways that people can reimagine custody and how they're going to share their child. So what are your thoughts?
First, I want to say with the joint managing conservatorship, there's a standard, right? The standard possession order that everybody generally defers to. The rules in Texas here says that those are the minimum guidelines when you have joint managing conservatorship. And even initially, when you go for the joint managing conservatorship, it doesn't require that there be equal possession for conservatorship when you're joint. But I want to focus on not what the typical guideline would be, not what the deference that most courts or most families go to. I want to talk about thinking outside the box. Most people don't know that they actually have control. They have the ability to determine what they want to do with their children, what kind of possession and access schedule that they want to allow each other to have based on personal beliefs, maybe work schedule, location. The courts do not have to decide that. That is completely up to the parents. And the courts typically only come in when the parents cannot agree.
Yep.
So
And so what has been your example? Can you give an example?
absolutely. So I focus more on trying to get the parents to do agreed parenting. I want to keep the courts out of it as much as possible. I can give you an example that, let's say, average in Texas, the standard, right? Most men would get what you call visitation, I guess you would say. The mother would be typically considered the primary conservator, gets to determine where the child goes to school, uh, and the right to receive child support, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And technically, dad gets all the other rights that mom gets. He just doesn't get those two child support rights and determining the residence of the child's school or in primary home.
Although the attorney, if they go to the attorney general's office, which a lot of people do, and, only because I used to work for them, the AG's orders are tend to be written very, very much in favor of a custodial parent. Though some of the rights almost read like she's going to be sole conservator. A lot of people don't know that. If you ever compare a AG order, standard order, compared to a privately, a private lawyer's drafted order, maybe through mediation, night and day. And so be careful what you wish for when you go to the attorney general and get a standard order, because even the standard order is pretty one-sided when it comes to
That,
decision making.
that is a
But
great point because I hear often about someone saying, "Hey, well, why don't you just go put yourself on child support, or why don't you just, and they'll go straight to the AG and they don't realize the power that they're giving away. Dad doesn't realize the power that he's giving away, and once you get into those orders, it's very hard to get out. Right? There's circumstances, time that's required in order to change that. But we want to focus on agreed parenting to where you don't have to be in those boxes, right? I have plenty of examples I come across. Typically, dad would get what they call the standard possession. He would
yeah,
see the child with the first, third, and fifth,
yeah,
depending on how
weekend.
many weeks they're in a month. So you're looking at dad generally would get a chance to spend 4 to 6 days out of the month with the child. If you do the expanded possession, you may be able to add in a Wednesday evening where he gets the child after school for a little bit and then return the child back. I mean, that's
Yep,
most
Thursday
parents.
eve. Yeah,
Yeah, Thursday. Most parents aren't really wanting that. They want to be more involved in their children's lives. I had an instance where we have like maybe there's a unique work schedule. Mom may work Thursday through Saturday, right? So instead of getting a child care provider, having to pay extra, during those days that she works, dad can have the child Thursday through Saturday, right? Mom is off on Sunday through Wednesday. So mom now takes possession of the child Sunday through Wednesday. And on this unique schedule, mom would have, I think she works every other Wednesday, right? So
mhm,
that means every other Wednesday, every other week, dad would have the child Wednesday through Saturday, and then the following week, Thursday through Saturday. So if you look at that, it's almost what they would consider 50-50. You're spending way more time with your children, uh, being actively involved. That's what you call, creative
yeah.
co-parenting, agreed parenting, to where both parents are having the opportunity to be actively involved and spending great amount of time with their children.
Exactly. And so you brought up 50-50, and that's a consultation phone call that I get all the time, from mostly from men, honestly, who would say something like, "Hey, I want 50-50 custody." Again, they're using that word. And what they mean typically is that they want as much time with their children as possible. Sometimes what they mean also is not to pay child support, which the courts will probably frown upon, especially if there's a big financial disparity between the parents. If father makes a whole lot of money every month and mother makes less, you're gonna probably have to pay her something, because it's a bigger percentage of her income compared, with the same percentage, but it's a bigger amount of money percentage wise of her income than his, if there's a big difference. So sometimes we've done 50-50 kind of schedules where we'll say, okay, why don't we do Monday, Tuesday, mom, Wednesday, Thursday, dad, and you flip on Friday. And then the weekend from Friday night to Sunday night is going to be with one parent. So every other weekend, you're going to get your child. Now that can become a 50-50 screw schedule. The most common 50-50 schedule that's custom is 50-50, where it's every other week, right? And that's easy to keep track of.
Yeah.
7 days a week, and you flip it. And you flip on Sundays or you flip on Fridays. That one is pretty popular as well. Now look, no judge is going to give that to you. One of the working titles we had for this topic today was what you brought up, which is that don't let the judge decide your fate. No judge is going to ever give something like a week on, week off, or a 2-2-3 schedule. That's only going to happen when you go and sit down at a mediation table and work it out, or maybe not formal mediation, but just work it out and then presented to the court. If the court believes that it's in the child's best interest, if it's outside of mediation, then you get what you want. If the court doesn't think it's in the best interest of the child, but it's a mediation, you again, because of the Henry Stephanie Lee case, you probably will still get what you want. So the point is go to mediation and lock it in and try to push it through. But you gotta agree, and it needs to be
Absolutely.
voluntary. Okay, so what other thoughts do you have about custody and what people want, how people can redress these problems without having to go so formal?
So I try to get, the clients I encounter, I want them to focus more on the children, right? I think the parents sometimes miss that focus point. The courts, the rules, everything is guided to focus on the best interests of the children. Not
Correct.
that dad has a new girlfriend, or mom has too many people over at her house or whatever. We want to look at the focus of what is best for the child. And when the parents start focusing on that, and they can start talking things out, well, what is your concern with so and so here? What is your concern with so and so here? You actually can write in order in your agreement. Hey, this mom's boyfriend has been violent to mom in the past, and I don't feel comfortable with my daughter there. You can say, hey, I don't want my child left alone with this person. You can actually agree and put those type of things in the orders. Like, you can designate your own rules when you mediate, when you come to an agreement that the judge is just not going to do.
Yeah, and so the customization of possession schedules and custody orders is a big deal. um I guess back to the AG, the orders look identical. They're cookie cutter standard orders. They have the exact same, gibberish, right? Legal gibberish. You got the conservative, sorry, the CP, the custodial parent. They have their specific rights and duties, including rights to make decisions for the child's major medical needs, education needs, psychological, psychiatric needs. All these things were typically not negotiated. They're just there, and these orders typically don't talk about passports. They typically don't talk about international travel. They typically don't talk about who your child can be left around. They don't talk about whether you're going to have a morality clause or whether or not you can allow the child to, um, you know, if they're going to do outside costs towards daycare, things like none of that. It's going to be a pretty standard stuff. So I guess this is a show that's encouraging people to look at alternative dispute resolution. And
Absolutely.
and would you agree with me that sometimes they don't really need to go through that? They just need to go to a therapist. Especially, no, really. I've
so,
just
so
met so
many
many.
so many times I meet clients that are against therapy, which is crazy. Like, I mean, you
Yes,
sometimes you need an outside person to help you sort through your stuff, right? Don't focus on the
correct.
other person. You got stuff you need to
Yeah.
focus on.
Yeah, and co-parenting therapy as well. And there are a lot of therapists out there who will do this. And I can give shout outs and different therapists out there, licensed professional counselors and other people like that, who they know there's a big problem in this country where, for whatever reasons, okay, narcissism or childhood trauma from your that causes you to have your own issues, or it's all his fault, that kind of thing. For whatever reason, there's a swell of people who need co-parenting therapy and to learn how to communicate. I think
Absolutely.
that is one reason we have such a backlog of case cases in court, because parents cannot communicate effectively over their kid. Literally, I've seen parents yanking a child, fighting over a child
Mm.
physically to try to take the child from the other parent, because the other parent thinks that the child is going to be taken to Mexico, or the other parent thinks that the child is going to be unsafe with this parent, but they're not able to communicate. And so a lot of the study that we do, we learned that when people are resorting to violence and they're resorting to force to try to get something, it's because communication has been broken down almost irretrievably, and we need people to, start using a little bit of reason and be willing to admit, listen, I messed up. Let's get to the table and talk through a therapist or at least a family law mediator. So we
Absolutely.
got, yeah, about 5 minutes left. But yeah, Cheryl, tell us what else, what other topics what other thoughts do you have about?
I want to touch a bit on child support. Maybe we can do a whole nother segment on that.
Of
Uh,
course.
it is typical that we would see that the mother typically would get or receive child support from dad, but there are so many different things to do than what the standard, what 20% or depending on however many kids that you have. A lot of times, fathers are get a bit upset with the amount that child support is set based on income. Maybe they feel that mother isn't using the funds properly, and sometimes mom generally is just trying to stick it to dad, like right. So I would encourage the parents once again, once we come to the table to see what the true issues are, it honestly can be a win-win for everybody. If your expenses for childcare is this much and the children are doing extracurricular activities for the X, Y, and Z, why don't we come to the table and discuss what is reasonably means to cover, what's needed for the child. Hey, you may be fine with a certain amount that's not going to break dad's bank and have him no money coming from his check, in addition to maybe if he's covering healthcare expenses, maybe you could be willing to accept something that's more reasonable, and certain events that may come up, maybe birthdays or when the child turns 16, maybe dad steps in and buys a car or whatever. There's so many different things that you guys can work out amongst yourselves instead of getting the courts involved in making things very, very heated and uncomfortable. Because once again, this is parenting, right? It's not going to go away. You're going to be in each other's lives forever. So the best thing to do is try to find the best interest focus of the children, so it can be an amicable situation and everyone can get along and everyone can have a win-win situation.
Yeah, a lot of people look at these things as zero sum again, where they just feel that you're trying to take my money, or you don't want to pay anything, you don't want to support your kid. These black and white ways of looking at something. And in mediation training, we talk about the orange skin example, where people don't know how to split up an orange, but the mediator ends up finding a creative way to make it win-win, where somebody gets the meat of the orange and the other person gets the skin of the orange in order to do something with it. And so we're always trying to find that middle happy ground. Look, for child support, Texas is pretty blunt because it's just a percentage. State of Florida, for example, a little different. You're going to calculate and take into account both people's incomes and amount of time they share with the child. In Texas, it's just a percentage of, that's a guideline amount. And that guideline has kind of become stuck in everyone's imagination. And whether or not mom wants to stick it to dad, she knows, look, the law is the law. The judge is going to give me the guidelines. It is what it is. And when you have something that like absolute in the law, it doesn't make for too much negotiations to happen, because most of these men know I'm going to have to pay what the law requires based on the guidelines. It is what it is. But if people can remember, yes, you guys can think outside the box. You can lower child support, or maybe have support be paid in kind for something else. Like I've seen it commonly happen where a child is 16 and the father buys the child a car, and in exchange, mom will reduce dad's child support arrears if he owes back child support, or reduce to take less in current obligation.
Okay.
And so that's one example that people can use to do something that's a little different out of the norm. Um, Certainly, if you're not, this is free advice. If you're not involved in your child's life, the other parent has zero motivation to try to work out a deal with you. Okay.
Absolutely.
That's number one complaint I hear my moms. Seriously. So for all the guys out there, I've done this for 14 years. You see the patterns in this business. Just take note. If the other parent judges your motives and they think that you mean ill, there's going to be less likelihood that they're going to want to work with you. But
Absolutely.
if people think that you put down your sword, you're not willing to fight, but you're willing to negotiate and work and show good faith action, like participating in a child's life and things like that.
Do what you say you're going to do.
Yeah. Oh, keeping your word, right? If
Hmm.
you say you're gonna see the child, make sure you actually go and see the child, because I've heard so many moms say, he keeps breaking my child's heart. That's a small thing to if it's a one time issue, but that small thing can become the issue that causes a deal to break down, and you guys are not able to progress and actually do an order that might be a pretty good deal. So you just see all this and you tell people, look, go to therapy, go to co-parenting therapy, get some relationship counseling advice, go to mediation, work with professionals who can help you overcome some of these obstacles. So you're not just having the judge, decide your fate based on the absolute standards of the law. Okay. But in the meantime, remember, there's no such thing as custody in Texas. It's conservatorship, and you have flexibility to be able to do something that is customized for your child.
Agreed parenting.
Yes, yes. And Cheryl, you wanna close us out? It's 21 after, so we gotta get wrapped up.
I mean, I just once again thank everyone for coming into the show. We have more topics coming in about family, child support, how we can use conflict resolution to make our own decisions and not let the judge decide our fate.
Exactly. All right, guys. Take care. Until next time. Signing out.